Message here. Jesus is dying on the cross. He's already acknowledged the thief on the cross. And now he comes to his mother. And all the pain and suffering that he's going through, he remembers his mother. In fact, he sees her. She's there at the cross. Why do you think Jesus calls her woman instead of mother? Do what?
A very good compliment to do that at that time.
Woman, calling her woman? Okay. When he tells John about keeping her, what does he call her? Yes, calls her mother then. But when he addresses her, he calls her mother. It's pure speculation as to why Jesus did that. I don't know for sure. But one of the things that I read about was that Jesus did not want to elevate her in the church that he was establishing. And we know that that happened. It talks about Mary's other children. Were those 4 brothers of Jesus from Mary? What wouldn't be any reason why not, right? It calls them Jesus' brothers. Didn't call him stepbrothers or anything. Well, there is one very large denomination that says those were not Mary's sons. Mary didn't have any other children. Why do you think they say that? Who do they worship? Who do they put on their dashboard in the car? Virgin Mary. So they have to come up with some way that she does not have any children besides Jesus. But as far as we can tell from the Bible, and we had no other record of it, these children are Mary's, Mary and Joseph's. Now Joseph is not here, of course. He's probably passed away, or surely has passed away. But the average age of males in the times of Jesus was about 30 to 40 years old. Now some certainly lived a lot longer than that, but that was the average. So Joseph could have easily been gone from the scene for several years by now, maybe even by the time Jesus started his ministry. So he's calling her mother, which woman, which is keeping her from being idolized or any kind of idolatry coming up in the Lord's church. Now, we know that Mary had other sons. Jesus had brothers. Why did he call on John to take care of his mother when he has 4 brothers? Do what?
I said they were related.
They were related. In Jewish law, their law, it was required that the oldest male would take care of the mother in case of the father's death. Well, that's Jesus. Jesus is taking care of that law right here. He is passing authority to take care of his mother to John. Now, why do you think he's passing it to John? And not one of his brothers.
And there was disciples who Jesus dearly loved.
Yes, it was. And evidently John had some smika, which was the Jewish term for heavy dose of the Spirit, because later on in John's life, what does he get to do? Do what? He's there at the Transfiguration. What else does he get to do? Yeah, he's called up into heaven. he sees things that we'd all love to see before we die. So John evidently has a special connection with Jesus. But
Jesus' mother and John would probably spend a lot of time together during that 3-year ministry. He followed him around.
probably so.
They had a close relationship, I would say. But his brother stayed at home and doubted that Jesus was the Son of God.
Another thing to think about is the Bible tells us that Jesus' brothers were not Christians. They did not believe at this time. Now we know at least James later did, because he becomes an elder in the church at Jerusalem. And so maybe all his brothers believed. I don't know. What we do know is that at this point in time, as Jesus is going to the cross, they are not believers in Jesus as the Son of God anyway. So what commandment is Jesus obeying here when he gives John his mother to take care of? Yeah. Ephesians 2, Deuteronomy 5:16, and Jesus said it in Matthew 19:19. Honor your father and mother. And in Ephesians, Paul says, obey your father and mother, for this is the first commandment with promise. And so God has given us a responsibility. When does that responsibility end? Never, does it? And if you look at our society, I think one of the key issues we've got in our society is age is not honored. It's not respected. We live in a very youth-oriented culture. And many, many children have nothing to do with their parents, or they certainly don't feel like they have a responsibility to their parents once they get out of the home. This is not just for kids. This is for everyone. And there is no end that I see to the responsibility that, for instance, I would have to my parents until their death. Again, I think a lot of this is being violated now. I don't think that in our youth culture there's a lot of aged people who are getting care and attention from their children. And if you look at what we do, when people are raising their children now, is the focus on the parents or on the children? Children, totally. You know, one of my clients had an accountant, and I was working with her on some book work, and she was telling me that she's tired. And I said, why are you tired? She says, every weekend is taken up with baseball. And it's travel ball. So we travel from early in the morning, we go somewhere, get there, play ball, and we come back Sunday night. And I'm going, unbelievable. They have totally taken their life and put it in their kids' life. And there's a lot of that going on. And so when the kids grow up, what value did they learn as they were growing up? Was the emphasis placed on their parents and the loving their parents, or was it placed on, hey, take care of me, I'm it? I think many a child has been ruined by the very fact that their parents dote over them and do everything for them, and so they never learn to honor their parents. This is a commandment from God. It's not something we can ever delegate or not do. Yes, ma'am.
It's about me, and so everything is centered around me, and you do what I want you to do instead of the other way.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly right. And one telltale sign of that we ought to, as a country, be concerned about is the birth rate among millennials is very, very low. Why is that, you think? Yeah, they don't, hey, I don't want anything disrupting my life. I don't want to have to do things for kids. I want to get out here and do things I want to do. And that's the kind of culture we've got in this country. And so naturally they don't want to have children. Joe?
We're really not that far removed in our country in this cultural change. But my mother remembers when her grandparents moved in with them. Now, they lived on a farm, and there wasn't Social Security, retirement set up. You know, things have changed in the past 100 years. Same thing on my father's side. I can remember when the elderly got too old, the children inherited the land, and it was kind of expected that they would take care of their parents, and they would move in and sometimes move from child to child. So we're really not that far removed.
Yes. In time. But we're so far removed in what we're doing compared to what happened in those days. I think most of us probably remember our grandparents, our great-grandparents being taken care of by their children. That didn't happen a lot today, but it was very common in the agricultural age of the United States. I know my grandparents did that. In fact, I've got a scar on my thigh where it would be my great-granddad stuck a cigar to my thigh because I didn't cry. He wanted to see if I would cry. So I have a remembrance of my great-grandfather. But that was very common for people to take care of their folks. Now we've got Social Security, retirement plans, and so kids think, well, you know, you're on your own. You got Social Security to take care of you or whatever, retirement. I need all my money to do all the wonderful playthings I want to do. So, yes, Tim.
You know, talking about what you're talking about, you know, a lesson I learned basically, what you're talking about is that as parents, whether it's athletics or academics or performing arts or whatever, parents are trying to push their children, I call it maybe put their child, maybe they're square, trying to put them in a round hole as far as winning scholarships or those things like that, and they're trying to push them in that direction. And what's the old saying? You lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So unless that child has the fire burning down inside them, there's nothing you're going to do to help them win a scholarship or those types of things. And so you're right that we spend all our time running our children around chasing these things and trying to push them that way, when in fact, if they don't have this desire, there's nothing you're going to do to get them there. So I can see looking back, look, mother and father, live your life for you and your family and go do things, go camping as a family or go travel as a family, but eat dinner around the table and don't spend all that time on weekends chasing these things, because if your child wants to play football in college, it's going to be up to them, not you. If your child wants to be an academic, a PhD or something like that, it's going to be up to them, not you. You can give them the tools and encouragement, but you can't force them and make them do those things. And so like you're saying, what happens is the child thinks it's all about them, and their head is filled up with these ideas that, well, I'm going to be a football player in college. And the fact is that somebody sitting on the outside watching their parents and doing these things is like, you guys are disillusioned. There's no way that you're going to play football in college. But we get caught up in that.
And that's interesting, all the rush to do things like that. And how many of them will ever see professional football or professional baseball? They spend all that time in that where they're neglecting some other things that are important. One of the things I see and this is a Dick Sullivanism, and that is, I don't think you're going to have much success with your child in priorities if they miss services so they can play ball. My daughter and 2 sons all played 3 sports, but they never missed a service. And sometimes that took a serious talk with the coach to keep from them being kicked off the team or whatever. But if we want them to understand that there's nothing more important than Jesus Christ, then we need to be careful with what we do in terms of their training and the things that we let them do or encourage them to do or facilitate their doing it. And one of them is forsaking the assembly so they can play ball. And, used to, when I was younger, you were younger, you didn't see high schools playing ball on Sundays or late Wednesday nights. I didn't have practice on Wednesdays. I didn't have practice certainly on Sundays. Now, these travel ball teams play all the time on Saturday and Sunday. They play late in the evenings and during the week, so they miss Wednesday evening. We've got our priorities off base. And I blame the parents, because the parents are facilitating this. These kids can't do this on their own. So it's just something that our culture is changing. And like I said, one of the sad parts of this is it's gone so far that even young people starting out are not going to have children. They don't want to be bothered. They want to travel. They want to have fun. They go on their trips. Kids get in the way. And that's a shame. That's our culture right now. Any questions on that? All right, the last one on there is interesting to me is it sounds like, to me, I don't know if it sounds like Jesus is rebuking his mother. Do you get that impression that he's being a little short with his mother? The fact that he calls her woman, does that bother you that he calls her woman? It does me a little bit, but I'm not in that culture. And in that culture, that was very respectful.
Woman, it's just a thought. You think maybe he was trying to protect her from being persecuted by calling her mother in front of this crowd? I don't know, it's just a thought. He may have been trying to actually protect her from persecution. I don't know how many people there may have known that she was his mother. Maybe all of them did, maybe none of them did. But, that's just a thought.
That's a really good point, Joe. I hadn't thought of that, and I think that may be more accurate than keeping her from becoming an idol in the church. I like that. That's good. But Lee?
To me, the way the word is that Jesus is keeping it totally in the physical realm on that, and not the spiritual realm. If he would have acknowledged her and him and Jesus together in that realm, it's like you said earlier, it would have elevated her up to the spiritual realm also, because he was God.
Yeah. And even with that, she ended up becoming an idol, didn't she? What a shame. But I don't think he was rebuking Mary at all. This was very common, and mother was a very honorable name. And Jesus, is, at this moment, this is so amazing. This is our Savior hanging on the cross, the most painful way to die that you probably can think of. And he remembers his mother. And to me, that is a good example, a righteous example of us. We never have a time when we're not responsible for taking care of our parents until they pass away. That is an obligation that God has given us. And parenthood stands way up in the air in God's thinking and his commands and his writings. Parenthood is an honorable and a very challenging, but also a very worthwhile endeavor for people. One writer rewrote that in a way, and I don't entirely think this would be a replacement, but it does give the thought of Jesus. Mother, surely you know me well enough to know that nothing could detain me but the affairs of my Father. That's when he goes into the temple at 12. And Mary and Joseph go back to find him, and he says, I'm taking care of my Father's business. And I think the way he meant that is, Mary, you know that my first responsibility is to God, to my Father, and nothing could detain me from doing that when I get an opportunity. And he had that opportunity when he went to the temple at age 12. And it's not like he's being rebellious, because in the very next sentence, it talks about he went on with Mary and Joseph and was under their supervision. In other words, he was obedient going out from here. So he was not being disobedient child. He felt like he had this important matter to take care of while he had a chance, and he did. But that didn't keep him from being obedient the rest of his childhood to his parents. In Luke 2, where he talks about honor his mother and father, where he says that he's about his Father's business, we see that Jesus is a wonderful son, a wonderful friend, a wonderful Savior. And there's nowhere that we get an indication that he would ever be that way with his mother because of Scripture. Let's look at some passages that talk about honor. Let's go to John 5:23. Does anybody have that? Go ahead.
John 5:23. So that all will honor the Son, even as they honor the Father. He who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him.
All right. What does it mean to honor? What does this word honor tell us to do? Do what?
Hold in high esteem.
Okay, hold in high esteem. What else do you think?
Respect.
Okay. Yeah, respect. High degree of respect. Obey, obviously, because Paul takes that honor thy father and mother and father, to obey your father and mother. Yeah. We are to honor God, so we need to know what honor is. Honor always implies attitude. It implies what we're thinking about that person. And so when it comes to God, thoughts are important. Yes?
Proverbs has many scriptures that talks about listening to mothers and fathers and respect. This whole thing you're talking about, Proverbs, there's many scriptures about that.
Yeah, and Proverbs uses the word honor more than any other book of the Bible by far. And you can just go through Proverbs and look at all the places it talks about honor. It talks about honoring everyone. We are to honor everybody, respect everyone. And so we need to understand what honor means. Turn to 1 Peter 2:17, if you would. Will somebody read that for me? 1 Peter 2:17. Go ahead, Tim.
Honor everyone. Love brothers and sisters. Fear God. Honor the emperor.
Okay.
That's
All right. So we honor all men. I was thinking about this yesterday. Actually, Friday night, we went out with Steve and Donna Mosley. And Steve has been a long-time preacher down in Athens. And he used the word jerk in reference to a certain president that we have. And as soon as he said it, he asked for me to forgive him and pray because he had besmirched somebody that we're told to honor. And I thought about that, you know, with the news media, I mean, we throw names around, we call people names that this never happened 20 years ago. I mean, ugly stuff. And I thought about, well, you know, I need to watch my mouth because I've been guilty of calling people in those kind of positions, maybe not jerks, but certainly my favorite word's idiot. And so I need to take that back and knock that stuff off. I think we need to be careful about what we say about people. Any comments on that? It's just my opinion.
God is not a respecter of persons. So we shouldn't be a respecter of persons. We should treat everybody the same, no matter what nationality, no matter what economic ability they have, or what office they hold. You know, we shouldn't be a non-respecter of people, and to honor them, we don't talk about them, we don't treat them a certain way. And I think that's a command from God. If he's not a respecter of persons, we better not be.
So you're getting back to honor all men. Yeah, that's true. So I shouldn't call anybody those kind of names. Those are very derogatory names that we throw around, and I certainly have been guilty of that.
Does honor have to be earned?
Does honor have to be earned?
Yeah.
I would say it's like honesty. I consider somebody honest until they prove me wrong. And I think I'll honor somebody until they prove they're not worthy of honor. Yes, ma'am.
I think that means honor the emperor, whether he's an idiot or jerk or what. I mean, we honor that position. We honor that person because he's in that position. Even if he's proven dishonest or whatever, we're still commanded to honor.
Yeah, can you think about this time of honoring Nero or Domitian? That would be very, very difficult for Christians because these people killed thousands and thousands of Christians. And Domitian was the one that I think hung them up in croaker sacks and burned them as for lighting the palace area. Romans 12 is a passage I want to look at. In verse 10, Romans 12 and verse 10. Does anybody have that? Romans 12, verse 10. Joe, go ahead.
Love one another deeply as brothers and sisters. Take the lead in honoring one another.
So we have an obligation as Christians to honor each other and take care of each other. You know, we were having a discussion last week in the class about how we honor each other. We said that means respect, but honor usually is talking about some active energy on our part. So when we honor our mother and father, is that just verbal? If we think that, that's okay. What's involved in us honoring our mother and father, for instance? Yeah, what kind? Think of a few. Yeah. Take care of them. Do things for them. Help them out. How many of you have been to a nursing home to visit? Why do they appreciate you going to and visit them when you really don't do anything there? You might get them a glass of water or something, but why? Why do they appreciate that so much? Well, that's right.
care of mom and dad, and that's where they put them, and mom and dad are kind of forgotten about.
They're lonely? Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
They can't really be a part of society anymore. Because if they're in a nursing home, likely they're not driving around and going to see people. And so they are in isolation, and it's really hard to you're not really in the world anymore. You're in this little tiny spot, and that's it.
Yeah. You know, there's two things there that I think we ought to think about. Number one, that is a huge plus for those people to get visitors. You see that whenever you go. When do we quit doing things like that as we grow older? Do we retire from teaching class, from doing things, maybe doing the Lord's Supper? As we grow older, do we wind down what we do in the church? Excuse me?
It depends upon your mind.
Depends on your mind? Okay, let's say you have a good mind. When do you wind down? Okay. Well, let me challenge a little bit. I think we do have to wind down, because you hit it, Rufus. My recall is terrible. I can read something, or I can meet somebody and walk away not knowing who I just met, or walk away not knowing what I just read. That's never happened to me in earlier years. Recall was always an important part of me being able to pass classes. So I think you do change as we grow older. As you grow older, what can you phase into? Let's say that you can't teach. I probably shouldn't be teaching. And at some point we get where we can't recall, we can't handle teaching a class. And so we phase out teaching a class. Maybe we can't, clean the building. Maybe we can't physically do some things. And maybe we can't mentally do some things. But what kinds of things can we do in our older age that's real important? Do what?
Visit.
Visit them, but what if you're in a nursing home? What can you do? Encourage others. You can write cards. You can make calls. See, I don't think there's any retirement program in Christianity. I think what we do changes, especially dependent, as Rufus says, on our physical and mental condition as we get older. But there are things that we can still do that make up for what we can't do. But we never quit serving. You can always encourage. You can always talk to somebody or have them talk to you, have that relationship. So keep that in mind, because what I've seen in my lifetime is a lot of people retire and they don't do anything. And I think that's dangerous in terms of our stand before the Lord, because as long as we are mentally adept, have the physical energy to do it, there are things that we can do no matter where we are. But anyway, just something to keep in mind, because Jesus wants us to have a relationship all our lives. Yes, ma'am.
I've noticed with some people, when they're older, it seems like they can have a closer relationship with God, because, not that you can't have a close relationship when you're younger, but when you can't do the physical things as much, you have more time to meditate on God's Word and pray and read the Bible. Or even people whose eyes aren't good, they sometimes listen to it on a CD or whatever, and they just have, you can see how they're closer to God. They have a more peaceful, presence or something, because they have all that time they can't put into physical things. They still put into working on their relationship with God.
Good point. Very good point. Is there any age where you still have your mind that you can't pray? And the power of prayer is a gift from God. And we've seen that. Just among our members, some of them have major issues, and prayers have gone up, and they certainly have made a difference. It's a good point. Any other? Okay. This is an important question. What's the difference between obeying your parents and honoring your parents?
I'm just doing it because I got to. I'm not doing it out of love and care and concern, or because you are my parents. I'm just doing it just to get it done.
Good point. When do you quit honoring your parents? We've talked about that. When do you quit? Yeah.
We should still honor our parents after death.
That's true, you can, but not.
Well, I hear people talk about their parents after they've died like they were dogs.
Okay. How about obedience?
Complexity to obedience.
You what the?
Sometimes there's some complexity to obedience. It depends on if your parents are Christians and they're requesting sinful things. You know, we've got it when you're in a household, you're under the authority of your parent. There's a transition when you leave and cleave.
Okay, good point. The word authority. When did my parents' authority over me end for all practical purposes? Could be that age. Also, certainly when you are married, you now have your own home, and so those parents are no longer over you. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't respect them, and with that respect, if they ask you to do something, if it's something you can do, okay, but they're not able to mandate that. They can't command you anymore. In other words, you are your own home, and problems really occur when mothers and fathers don't turn loose with their babies when they get married. And God tells you to. You leave mother and father and you cleave to each other. You set up your own home with your own authority for your kids. So keep that in mind. There's a difference between obedience and honor.
So do you think that if you children obey your parents, that's directed towards young people, like not unmarried, maybe not adults yet?
Yes.
Okay.
But to me, obedience goes along with authority. If I can command you to be obedient, I have authority over you. And my parents didn't have authority over me once I started my own household. Anybody disagree with that? I mean, sometimes I'm just throwing out what I think, and I need to be careful with that.
The wife relationship is the wife. The mother and father relationship is, well, the authority thing, you know. We leave and cleave, but
My wife thinks that authority thing goes on into marriage. Not really, I'm just kidding. Okay. We talked about not calling Mary mother. I think we've gone over that quite a bit. Let's talk about John for a little bit. What happened to all the disciples when Jesus was taken prisoner in the Garden of Gethsemane? Scattered. Did any of them stay with Jesus? No. They all forsook Jesus. And he told them they would. He said, "You're all going to forsake me." And of course, Who jumps up and says, never me? I get there. Do what? Peter. Yeah, Peter's always first to jump out and put his foot in his mouth. And he says, no, not me, Lord, never. And all the rest of them said that, along with Peter. They all said, no, never. We'll never forsake you. And yet, that very night they did. And as far as I know, and from the Bible anyway, the only disciple that was at the crucifixion is who? John. So it tells us something about John. I think he's closer to Jesus. I think he's probably the closest of the apostles to the Lord. And so he's back there watching Jesus be crucified. Now, if you track the apostles and their commitment to Jesus, it was very common for, and people, it would be one of the things that Jews just craved, was to be a disciple of a rabbi. That was huge. And usually it was the elevated educated people that became disciples or Talmudim of rabbis. Now, were any of the apostles highly educated? Maybe Luke. He's not an apostle, but he's he's a disciple at this time. He's not an apostle. None of them are apostles, really. But these people all forsook him. Yeah, do what? Paul? Now, Paul was highly educated. Yes, he was. So, Paul, if he had stayed a Jew, could have been a rabbi probably with his education. But to ask these fishermen and these common folks to be disciples of a rabbi, that had to be amazingly complimentary to all those 12 disciples. And so, as they follow Jesus and they learn about Jesus, they are thinking just like John, even John the Baptist, was thinking that Christ was going to take over the world and he was going to be the guy that took down Rome and made the Jewish nation the biggest, best nation in the world. And we know that because as you follow the thoughts of the disciples, they are very interested in Jesus, very following Jesus, and highly respectful of Jesus. But when it comes down and he's taken by the Jews and then by the Romans, they disappear. So their faith in Jesus was he's going to be the supreme commander and take Rome out. Once they see that's not going to happen, they disappear. And when do they come back to Jesus? What event solidifies their faith? Excuse me? Resurrection. Yes, indeed. When Jesus is raised from the dead, then they are locked in. That proves to them this person is from God. And he may not be leading us in a way that we'll overcome Rome, but he has something that we all want, and we're going to follow him. And they do. And they meet him, and of course they are given the Holy Spirit, and they take off. And if we read and think Martyrs, the Martyrs Martyrdom that they go through, all of them are said to be killed for being a preacher, being a Christian, except for who? Which one was not killed? John. John evidently lived to be a very old age. In fact, it's interesting to me, I've been reading, I really enjoy reading first century writers, but you read Clemens or Polycarp, who were disciples of John, and yet they're way off on some things, which is interesting to me, which says, Jesus, they were probably not off when John was around, but after John, the church moves away from the exact pattern that they had before. And the true church stayed with that pattern, but some went a different direction. The Pharisees, the chief priests, took advantage of the fact that the disciples ran. They left Jesus. Look at John 18 and verse 19. John 18 and verse 19. Does anybody have that yet? Do you? Go ahead.
The high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching.
Okay. What do you think it means by he questioned Jesus about it? Do what? Yeah.
You're such a great man.
Yeah. You're so great, your disciples won't even stay with you. So the disciples brought additional shame upon Jesus. Certainly being crucified, being convicted the way he was, being scourged, all that brought shame upon Jesus. But probably one of the biggest bullets that hit him was his disciples forsaking him, and then having the priest, the high priest, hey, Jesus, we're your disciples, you know. So that was embarrassing that his own disciples forsook him. And so did the chief priest miss taking advantage of that? Tim?
Matt.
Oh, I just wanted to ask you, and also in 1815, it says that there was a disciple that went in with Jesus into the court of the high priest, and wasn't that John himself? Wasn't he with Jesus during the interrogation and all of that? He had not left.
Yeah.
So not
Yeah.
all.
That's where Peter denied Christ, was right there inside that area. Any other comments on that? All right. Do you think Mary went to live with John? Okay, yeah, it does. And how about, what if somebody came to you and said, here's my mother, I want you to take her and you take care of her from now on? Does John say, well, Lord, I've got a lot to do, I got my own family, you know, I don't know how I can take care of you. Your mother's old, she needs a lot of attention. Did you hear that from John? No, he didn't say a word. John just took her and took care of her from then on. This is not a small thing. If you've ever cared for an elderly person that needs a lot of care eventually, then you know how much effort, energy, and time goes into this. So, you know, I don't know what John's household was like. Did he have a wife that would help in this matter? We don't know. But he took her and willingly took her and would take care of her from then on. So anyway, that is amazing to me.
Shows the extreme love that John and Jesus had for each other, that they were probably closer than brothers.
Certainly closer than his brothers, huh? Good point. He obviously loved John a lot, and John loved him. We know he was the disciple that loved. And so it seems appropriate that he would take Jesus' mother for his, to take care of. Okay, any other questions? We'll wrap up. We'll go to the, one of the deeper sayings of Jesus on the cross next time, and we're going to dig into that and try to figure out what is he really saying in that it'll be his fourth saying or third. I gotta forget where I'm at. Anyway, the very next one, And it's interesting to note that none of these are all in one book. They're scattered out. In fact, that's talking about his mother. John's the only one that maybe mentions that.